Now, this is almost part two of our Trump war analysis this week, isn't it? We've already done one bit about surprises, and it was quite a surprise, really, to find that at 2:00 in the morning, UK time, up pops Donald to make an address to the American people. Very posh, walking out to a lectern with nobody there. None of the usual, because normally he's got people surrounding him with a desk, isn't he? But this seemed very official. Do you remember they either sit behind the big desk and announce wars, or he marched down a corridor, very much like the corridor that his friend Vladimir marches down. Actually, do you remember when the doors open, when they've got
when the bloke turns his head like in a weird? Yeah. That's my favourite. That guy who looks like he's wearing a Trumpton Tower hat and has to turn his head at 45 degrees.
Yeah, he's the one.
I love that. Well, I love watching that.
They haven't quite got the Trumpton guy, but they're very close now. He has a door opened for him when he comes through and marches up to a lectern. It was very excellent, very similar. So he's learning from other dictators and authoritarian leaders around the world how these things are done. So he had a 20-minute speech, and it was a bit rambling, but I thought what I was going to try and look at in the next few minutes that we've got here is what we've learned from this speech, whether there's anything new on the table, whether there's anything that we can pick out and say, oh yes, this is going to happen, and what effect it's having both on the international situation and also domestically back at home in the States in terms of what he's trying to achieve. So, I mean, there's lots of guns around it, as you would normally expect from Trump, in terms of the biggest, the best, the greatest ever. And as you quite rightly point out, everything has to be repeated 3 times. We're on to that. I mean, I've highlighted so that victories like few people have ever seen before. This is what he said, that the ability to launch missiles and drones is dramatically curtailed, and their weapons factories and rocket launchers are blown to pieces. Very few of them left. Not the sort of language that you can imagine somebody like Obama would have used, but it's his style, isn't it? And it was on. I mean, there were teleprompters there, so presumably it's all been written in advance. I don't know whether do you remember? I never thought in the same context I'd be talking about Frankie Howard. But do you remember Frankie Howard? Yeah,
I do. Up Pompeii,
yeah. Well, I saw an interview with Barry Cryer, who used to script write for Frankie Howard in his younger days. And Barry Cryer was saying that when he first wrote scripts for Frankie Howard, Barry Cryer didn't put any no, shut your face. He didn't put any of that in. He left it to Frankie Howard to actually ad-lib. And Frankie Howard came back and complained that he hadn't put any of those in. So I wonder, it'd be interesting to see from the script whether some of this stuff that Trump actually says when he's making these speeches is actually scripted for him, or whether he's gone off script and is just putting in his own little eccentricities.
No, maybe one day we'll find out.
Well, absolutely. So just to read you a few bits and pieces. So he was talking about Venezuela and what a success Venezuela has been. And he said, and now we're working with Venezuela in a true sense. We're joint venture partners. Now, what do you pick out from that? Joint venture partners. One wonders whether this was part of the plan in terms of getting their hand on Venezuela's
oil supply.
Yeah.
That would be credible, wouldn't it? That would be credible. Yeah, which would suggest that somebody did twig that the supply of oil could dry up.
Yeah. And the other thing he says in this speech as well, because we'll come on to this in a bit more detail in a minute, but he's also talking about the allies, or erstwhile allies, because he treats them as though they're enemies now almost, doesn't he?
Yeah.
The Europeans and so on, about their going and getting their own oil from, because he sees the Americans as having done the hard work in terms of bombing the ship, if you'd excuse the expression, out of the Iranians. And now it's easy just to make it sound as though you just rock up with your tankers off the Straits of Hormuz like a filling station, and they fill up your tanker and off you go. And there'll be no problems now. So the other option he gives them, of course, is he says, you've got 2 options. This was in his speech. You've got 2 options. The first one, which I think is the easiest, you can buy your oil from the United States of America. We've got loads of it. So from a commercial perspective, they presumably see themselves as having an agreement with Venezuela, their own home production and excess oil to be able to ship out all around. I mean, they do export a lot of this LNG, don't they, to Britain from once. I don't know what the percentage is now that we take of American LNG.
Now, I think the key LNG producer was it Kuwait, who supply a lot of our LNG. In fact, that was one of the pivots out of the Ukraine war, when we stopped, not just we, but Europe's getting as much gas piped and pivoted to LNG, which tells you, although it doesn't feel right at the moment, that world economies do flip in the face of adversity. Now, whether commercially it would make sense to have a tanker travel all the way across the Atlantic instead of the journeys they do at the moment, I doubt it.
I thought we were,
I don't know. We're self-sufficient on petrol, so I hear, and I think Norway supply a lot of our gas, but we do get top-ups on LNG from Kuwait.
Right. I thought we had LNG coming from the States as well, but
we could well do.
Yeah.
I just remember seeing that bloke from Sky, Ed Conway, who's a bit like Peter Snow, who got all these charts. He's very good, actually.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I've stopped you, so you keep going.
So that's a market, I guess, that he feels that he can open up in terms of selling oil and LNG to Europe, particularly. I would suggest he's talking as well about how they've knocked out the possibility of the Iranians producing a nuclear weapon. I mean, that was one of the prime objectives.
Yeah, we've heard that before, haven't we? I read this morning. Yes, they did obliterate this particular facility in October with, was it Desert Hammer or something? But surprise, surprise, they went somewhere else and started doing it somewhere else.
Well, this is what he said. He said that they promised that they weren't going to do it again, but then they moved their production elsewhere. But nobody's suggesting that they've managed to get hold of this enriched uranium, of which they've got a fair old bit, so I understand. So I'm not quite sure how that's achieved any of his objectives in that respect. He goes on to talk about how, again, the American forces are the best in the world. Nobody's ever seen anything like it and the likes. And he talks about, as I said just now, about the Europeans and, for that matter, the rest of the world converging on the Gulf and sorting out the Straits of Hormuz, because they're effectively going to be, I mean, I think you said this in previous weeks when we talked about it, and it looks, in theory, it looks increasingly like ultimately, and we don't know when that's going to be, they're going to wash their hands of the whole affair and just walk away. I do wonder at the moment, I don't know what you feel about this, the suggestion seems to be that the Israelis and the Americans are working to a different timetable, and that the Americans are only going to be involved or staying involved all the while the Israelis haven't finished what they want to do. I mean, they started issues within Lebanon, haven't they? But I don't think they finished their bombing campaign in Iran.
I don't know. In our previous pod, we did talk about, because you're right, you would expect Trump to want to exit, and he said it's all going to be over very quickly, and so did Rubio. But it isn't. It's 5 weeks now, isn't it? They're still there and still very active. I think the big variable is what's going to happen with the 5,000 troops who are in the region. I still can't imagine you would transport that many men and women and not deploy them. It just doesn't make sense. And I do wonder whether Trump might use the long weekend when the markets are closed for 3 days. I don't think they take the Monday off. No. But our markets are closed, European markets are closed, to go and do something.
Well, everybody's talking about Carg Island still, aren't they? This area. But,
whether it's Carg Island or somewhere else. But what do you do with 5,000 men and women?
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see, won't it? I mean, the other thing that he was talking about was, we discussed this before we recorded this, about how wonderful the actions that they've taken have supposedly been for the US stock market and also for the price of oil and inflation in the States and what have you. So how do you think this is going down domestically? I think you've had a friend who's been
I've got a friend of mine who's just come back from a 3-week holiday in Florida, lucky chap. But he said that the gas prices were up to $4 a gallon, and that translates It's not the same gallons as us. That translates to $1 a litre. So still cheap by our standards, but they're not used to paying that. And of course, most of their vehicles are gas guzzlers. So from the gas price alone not going down well, obviously it depends whether you ask a Democrat or a Republican, but I think the opinion polls are 60 plus against.
Yeah.
So not going well. And people are noticing higher inflation. Interest rates will not be coming down. I can't believe the chair of the Fed will bring them down at the moment. So not great.
So ultimately, out of this, for all this speech that he gave last night where people were expecting him to outline where we go from here, we've just got total contradictory messages again. We've got messages that troops going there would suggest that they're there for a longer term commitment. Meanwhile, he's talking about them extracting within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And in the next breath, he's talking about bombing them back into the Stone Ages, which is a bit impolitic, isn't it?
If you credit him with some strategy, you would say this is the strategy of confusion. Because you're not going to tell your enemy exactly what you're going to do, are you? So that's maybe the credit. I do have one interesting observation, because you obviously watched that 20-minute speech. I did the same with Mr. Starmer in the morning in Downing Street. And I think we can conclude that both speeches said nothing. So
we haven't really got time to go into Mr. Starmer's speech at the moment.
There's no point, Sean.
No,
it didn't say anything.
Well, I would expect you to say that. One thing I would say, it says, and the actions of the government in this country over the last week, I think we've crossed the Rubicon now. I don't think there's any going back to pulling out an invitation to, I mean, we could talk about the king going there as well, but pulling out an invitation to invite Trump to the palace for a special never been done before, this, that, and the other. I think those days of chumminess are over. And
the strategic position of particularly Europe and the States are miles apart.
I think we're waiting for a new president now and hoping that he gets his legs cut off effectively in the midterms come November.
Yeah.